We look into U.S.-South Africa relations with the CEO of the American Chamber of Commerce in South Africa, Michelle Constant, joining us in studio to shed some light on that. Michelle, thanks so much for your time today. You know, today I came across a headline that read, Agoa, Agona, going. Just highlighting, you know, the uncertainty we find ourselves in when it comes to the renewal of, you know, that agreement. Now, with the expiration date around the corner, what are your expectations when it comes to that, and how will that impact American businesses doing business within the continent?
So, first of all, I think we need to take into account that in less than a month we'll have an election in the United States. And I think all bets are off on that one. So dependent on whichever of, you know, the two parties come into a position of power, that would then perhaps impact on Agoa. We do know that Agoa will be renewed, or should be renewed, in 2025. If it is renewed, the question, of course, would be, would it be renewed for South Africa? And there have been some tensions with regards to South Africa and the United States, particularly in political and ideological positions. But I am very hopeful, and I'm very sure that it would be fine. And I think we need to remember that Agoa is an opportunity. We talk about American companies, but Agoa is an opportunity for small to medium and large South African companies as well. Massive opportunity. And we now have the US Africa Trade Desk, which has just been formed with the help of Power Africa and also USAID. And they really have an incredibly rigorous process that supports South African companies who are interested in bilateral trade and who are interested in taking product stateside, not just product, I mean it might be intellectual property as well. And there's real support at that trade desk as well.
Let's talk about those bilateral relations, particularly with the US and South Africa. You did mention there that, you know, that relationship is pretty strained considering what has happened last year with the Lady R incident, as well with, you know, more investment from China into South Africa. What have you made of everything that's happening on that front, and how that, you know, determines how the US kind of relates to South Africa?
So I find the private sector incredibly positive in general, and it's been a great learning curve for me to see how that works. And in much the same way, I think we do understand, yes, we had the Lady R issue last year, we do have the Palestine-Israel issue this year as well. But I think if we look at it with an economic lens, there are huge opportunities. And I don't see us simply saying, well, it's off the table because of what those issues could be. That is, of course, dependent on which way the elections go, because we have had some pushback from certain Republicans and one or two of the Democratic Congress members historically. So we would have to see. I mean, it really does feel as though at this point we're in a little bit more of a waiting game than we might have been a year ago. I think that the general consensus last year when we had the Agoa event here in South Africa, the general consensus was that in fact what we would do is ideally push for Agoa to be renewed before 2025, A, and secondly for it to be renewed for a longer term. I mean, the period of 5 years is an incredibly short period of time, and research has shown that the closer you get to the end of that period, the less constructive bilateral trade you have.
Let's talk about Agoa in a sense of, well, bringing the election under the spotlight here. How do you think Agoa will look under Trump's administration or under Kamala's administration? Will there be some sort of differences if it is renewed?
I think there will be differences, and it's really very, very difficult. As I said, all bets are off the table on this one. We have heard former President Trump state that he would raise the tariffs for imports into the US. So that would be very disconcerting. We have seen in The Economist, they have an index which would look at how supportive the US would be under a Trump administration. And we are not looking good in that particular space. But having said that, as I say again, it's not something that one can say this is a definitive or that's a definitive. I think that with a democratic administration, we might see something slightly different. We hope we would see something slightly different. But once again, I would not be prepared to comment on which way it would go.
Now, taking all of that into consideration, the diplomatic tensions and the upcoming election, have you seen differences or difference in the trend when it comes to investment into Africa from the US?
You know, I think that we underestimate how impressed globally the GNU has impacted bilateral relations. I think certainly we've seen it and heard it from various different members from the US government. They are impressed at how quickly it took place. We know that it's very fragile. We know that it continues to be fragile. But I think that we've seen real support for how that's worked. The other thing we've seen, and this is, I think, very important, and I'm very interested in it personally as well, is the public-private partnership that we've seen taking place. So with the relationship with the presidency, the fact that we're now shifting into phase 2 of this 3-pillar engagement, I think that does read very well. And it reads very differently. There are very few countries that will do what we are doing. And I think it does say, you know, quite positively that we are all for South Africa in many ways again.
Michelle, thank you so much
Absolute
for your
pleasure.
time and those insights. That was Michelle Constant, CEO of the American Chamber of Commerce in South Africa.